Well, hello and good afternoon. And this is a week in which we turn our mind to remembrance. In particular, we remember the extraordinary sacrifice of members of this community, our community, who gave their lives during the First and Second World Wars, those most terrible conflicts of the 20th century. 298 Old Rossallians died in the First World War, but over 1,000 served during the 4 years of conflict. One of those individuals was a boy called Rex Crummack, or a man called Rex Crummack. He was born in 1887, and he was born into quite a wealthy family in Salford. His father ran a brewery business in Manchester itself. He came to school here, he absolutely loved sports, and when he left school, he went to train to work in the cotton industry in Manchester. First World War breaks out, he joins the army, and he serves with great distinction at the Western Front. And, like many Old Rossallians, he kept in regular touch with the school throughout his time in the armed forces. And he sent regular letters back to his old housemaster. And here is one of the letters you can see that he wrote whilst he was sitting in a trench in France. Much of what he talks about are the really mundane details of life. And he talks actually about the boredom of being in France and Belgium for much of this time. But he also actually took the opportunity to play some sports when he was away from the front line itself. And he writes here, "I have played 4 games of rugger, and how I love it. And I really can't wait until the time when I can stretch my legs against the old school. I have fallen deeply in love with this most glorious of games. It is great." So he's a really enthusiastic sort of character, even in the midst of the First World War. So the war ends, and it had been decided that in 1920 the Olympics would be held in Belgium. But of course that had been decided before the First World War, back in 1912. But by 1920, Europe was a very different place. 4 empires no longer existed. The Russian Empire, the German Empire, the Ottoman Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, they'd all gone. And 18 new nation states had been sort of formed in their place. So it was a strange event, the 1920 Olympics in Antwerp. Obviously, Spanish influenza in 1919 had made everybody a little bit jittery and anxious. And some countries were prevented from turning up because of the sanctions which had been imposed by the Treaty of Versailles, also in 1919. So it was a bit of a rackety affair, to be honest, these Olympics. But the Olympics of 1920 were extraordinary for a couple of reasons. One, the oldest ever medal winner, a Swedish man who took part in a shooting competition. He was 72 years old. He took part in his last Olympics in Antwerp, and also the very last tug-of-war competition ever to be held or ever to be seen as an Olympic sport was also an aspect of the 1920 Olympics. But anyway, let's get back to Rex Crummack. Rex Crummack came out of the army and he took up hockey. That was his sort of new sport, his new fad. And of course, he was very good at hockey, as he'd been very good at rugby, and he was immediately picked for the English team. And or the Great Britain hockey team of 1920. There were only, in fairness, 4 countries that took part in the competition. And in the final, it got down to the final, so a round-robin competition, got to the final, and England, or Great Britain, beat France 17 goals to 2. So he'd just come out of the army. Less than 2 years later, he finds himself as an Olympic gold medalist. What a story. He was also the only golfer in the UK to take part in the British Amateur Championships before the First World War. He competed in 1909, but also after the Second World War as well. So not only was he an Olympic gold medalist, but he held also a record of achievement to be very proud of in golf as well. He was also an extraordinarily brave individual. He lived on until he was almost 80, and he died in the 1960s. So it's really important that we remember those who gave their lives during these conflicts. And I think that it's not just those who gave their lives, but it's also those who lived through these terrible times, that their courage and their resilience and everything that they were as people should provide us with a huge amount of inspiration, not just now, but also thinking about the people that we want to be in the future and the community that we aspire to be. So I think good, strong communities, they look to the past, they celebrate and they nurture that collective memory, but they do so to be inspired to face the future with real confidence. I hope that you all have an absolutely fantastic week this week. We're very, very excited by all the wonderful things which are happening in school. And of course, this last week, we've announced the development of our girls' football programme, where Millie Bright, the England and Chelsea football star, is going to be working with us as our ambassador and coach for our girls' football. So terribly exciting times in so many ways. Have a great week. Bye now.
Today I would like to talk to you about what I think is one of the most significant pictures ever taken by humanity. It doesn't just represent all the amazing research done by scientists around the world, it also puts our own anxiety and problems into perspective. On the 5th September of 1977, a group of NASA scientists discovered what later became known as the Grand Tour. The Grand Tour is an alignment of the outer planets of the solar system. It allows for a space probe to be slingshotted around those planets and do research about them. The space probe designed by the scientists and engineers, which was later going to be launched, became known as Voyager 1. Voyager 1 had a range of scientific experiments and devices on board, which were all powered by one small nuclear reactor. At its base, the nuclear reactor had a square piece of radioactive material. This provided the energy. However, due to nuclear decay, this radioactive piece of material lost its radioactivity over time, and the energy supplied became less. Therefore, to keep the space probe alive longer and do more research with it, scientists began to shut down parts of the space probe. In February of 1990, another device had to be shut down to keep the space probe alive. The decision was made that a camera on board, which was mainly used to analyze and take photographs of Jupiter's and Saturn's atmosphere, was being shut down. One of the most significant astronomers at the time, Carl Sagan, made the request that before the camera was being shut down, it was pointed at Earth one last time to take a picture. That picture was then sent to Earth and the camera was shut off. The picture was taken from a distance of 3.7 billion miles from Earth. Before I'm now going to show you the picture, I would like you to think about how big Earth would be on that scale. You might be wondering where Earth even is on this picture. However, if you look closely, you might see the pale, tiny little blue dot. That blue dot is Earth. Everything you've ever seen, every place you've ever visited, every person who've ever lived, and every person who lives right now, and most likely every person who will live in the future, lives on that planet. To put it in even bigger perspective, this picture only shows a fraction of our galaxy, the Milky Way. And there are 100 billion galaxies in our universe. Personally, I think looking at that picture helps you realize how small, how tiny we all are, how insignificant we are for Earth existence, how insignificant the Earth's existence is for the existence of our galaxy, and how insignificant our galaxy is for the existence of our universe. So to narrow it then back down, all our problems and our seemingly big problems, our wars, our conflicts, and our anxiety just comes down to a tiny, insignificant problem which has no influence on the greater scale of the universe. Thank you very much for listening.
It's been really wonderful to see everybody back this last week and working hard within their lessons. For me, it's been a really important week in terms of thinking about friendships and relationships and what they mean to each and every one of us. And so my reflection after the Headmaster's Award is all about what it means to be a good friend. And I think it's something that we all want to be for other people, but it's also something that we all want and need in our lives. This week, we are focusing on two individuals, both of whom have impressed in terms of their work ethic, but also in terms of their membership of the school community. And our Headmaster's Academic Award this week goes to Julia Scarpello Parody, and our Kindness Award this week goes to Alice Hoggarth. Julia has worked exceptionally hard recently. Not only has she prepared for and taken examinations for entry to Oxford, she has also handed in her EPQ project in the last few weeks. This was a 5,000-word essay based on the education system of Argentina. Furthermore, Julia continues to impress her teacher, Dr. Adcock, in every single Spanish class with her fantastic levels of effort and commitment to the subject. This week, Julia presented a degree-level standard presentation to the rest of the class on the topic of racism in Spanish-speaking world, in which she showed a great level of maturity and empathy, and as such, Julia is a fantastic example of somebody who is committed to their academic studies and always works to achieve their very best. Alice has been nominated for the Kindness Award and actually also for the Academic Award because Alice has been doing a great job with Zoology Society every single week. She's now running the Key Stage 3 section entirely on her own. She's led a nature walk around the school site, and she is brilliant at explaining to younger pupils about aspects of zoology and everything to do with animals. Her teacher believes that she is a fantastic role model and has a very kind nature, which means that all of the pupils whom she interacts with absolutely buy in to the things that she is teaching about. Alice, this is a fantastic achievement. Thank you very much for everything that you're doing. Now, as I said at the beginning of my assembly, I would like to focus today on the idea of friendship and what it means to be a good friend. And when I wrote these bullet points that I put here, I thought of them in two contexts. The first one being, what do I think that I would like from a good friend? So who do I think of in my life as a good friend to me, and what kind of characteristics do they have? But also whether they match up with what I do for others in terms of what I think makes a good friend. And actually sometimes those two ideas are not necessarily the same as each other for me. So they may not be the same for you either. What you may think of as being a good friend is when you do it may not be the things that you expect from others in terms of them being good friends to you. So let's go through these points and see what we think. So good friends are there for you when you need it and not just when it suits them. Certainly for me, it is the case that those people who have been there for me when I have been at my lowest or when I have been finding things particularly difficult, I have absolutely treasured their friendship always. And when I'm thinking about whether I've been a good friend, I often think about the fact that if I say to somebody, "How are you?" and they say, "I'm all right," but they don't look it and they don't sound it, that it is my responsibility as a good friend to try and work out whether there is a way that I can support that person, because I can sense that actually they might need me even if they're not being so obvious about it. And sometimes being a good friend is having that sense that not quite everything is right with a person that you care about and that you want to be there for them, and that you need to find ways of being there for them that they will feel comfortable with and that they will really appreciate. Good friends value your friendship. That is absolutely important in terms of self-value. If your friends value your friendship, they treat you a certain way, they are kind to you, they listen to you, they take on board your advice, they think of you when you're not thinking of yourself. But equally, if you are thinking of yourself as a good friend of somebody, be sure to consider, do I actually show my friend that I value their friendship? Do I take the time to listen to their worries or concerns? Do I take the time to find out what's going on in their lives? Or am I just thinking that I'm a good friend because I tell them lots about myself? Good friends are also honest. And that is one of the things that I think is really important to share with you. I think it's very easy to think that in order to have a good friendship with somebody, it is smooth, plain sailing, with not too many arguments, not too many times when you disagree, not too many situations in which you might dislike what the other person has to say. But actually, a true and proper friend is somebody who will always have your best interests at heart, and that in doing that, they will sometimes challenge you because they think that you've made a mistake or you've made a bad choice. It is really important to listen to those people in your life who have the courage to challenge you and have the courage to say that they don't agree with something about what you're doing, because ultimately, potentially, they are your real true friends and they are looking out for you because they are making sure that you stay true to yourself as well. Good friends help you to see the best in yourself. Every single friend that I've had that I've felt really close to have been those people that make me feel like I'm a wonderful person to be around. And every single friend you have, you should consider their friendship within the context of whether, even if they do challenge you and maybe make you feel a little bit uncomfortable, that ultimately down the line, you feel that by being friends with them, you feel good about yourself and who you are and who you're trying to be. Good friends don't use guilt or blackmail as a tool of control. The reason I've put that here is because it is sometimes the case that we can end up feeling trapped in a friendship where actually no matter what we do, no matter what we say, we can't ever seem to get it right. And sometimes I have found, particularly when I had friendships at school, that I felt that I constantly had to perform and be something for somebody in order for them to accept me as a friend. Ultimately, I worked out that those weren't my real friends, because my friends would never ever dream of making me feel that way. So if you find yourself in a friendship that isn't working because ultimately you feel like a bad person being in a friendship with them, then that friendship is not a good friendship. And for those of you who are having those kinds of relationships with people, it's about trying to turn them into something more positive, more giving, more understanding, and in so doing, creating a situation where the other person in your friendship feels that you care about them and that you always have their best interests at heart. The last thing, which is really important, is that good friends are there for you and will be there for you, whether now or in 2 months' time, in a year's time, in 5 years' time, 10 years' time. They can have their own entire lives in the meantime and have completely different friendships, relationships, but ultimately good friends stay good friends no matter who else they're friends with. And so your friend having other friends should be a really positive thing for you, not a negative thing for you. If you find that you are struggling with the idea that your friend has other friends, it means that you yourself need to ask yourself the question, are you using your friend in order to make yourself feel good about yourself? In which case, that is not a friendship that is sustainable or positive for the both of you. And it should be the case that your friendship always has space for other people to be part of that group. Ultimately, friendship, friends are at the core of how we function as human beings. It is why the last few months when we were in lockdown before the summer were so difficult, because friendships are not the same over Zoom as they are in person. We need our friends and we draw a huge amount of support, love, identity from being friends with others, and they give us a huge amount by being friends with us. As such, please, what I would like you to do this week is to consider your friendships. Are you a good friend to others? Do you have good friends who are kind and generous and thoughtful of you as well? And if you find that to either of those questions you think, actually, there are things that I could fix about myself as a friend, or that I need to work on in terms of my friendship with others, or that actually a friend is not making me feel as good as I would really like to feel, then this is the week to have those conversations with others in an honest and kind way. I wish you a lovely week.
This Friday is World Kindness Day, and here in Rossall we are making plans for a little act of kindness around the square.
The World Kindness Day is celebrated yearly on the 13th of November. It is when people are promoting acts of kindness and are celebrating together.
Have a think about something you could do to help us spread some happiness by being especially kind this Friday.
In sports this week, the football teams were in action versus Porovic Soccer and Fleetwood Town Football Club Community Trust. The Headmaster's 11 ran out 9-3 winners, while the first team lost 7-2 and the seconds won 10-2. The hockey men's first team lost out to Fylde Hockey Club first 4-2 in a closely contested fixture on Wednesday evening. In other news, the school is delighted to announce a new girls' football programme starting in September 2021. This programme is also endorsed by Millie Bright, current England international. Have a good week.
Ebenezer?
I was afraid you might not recognise me.
I recognise you.
There are things I would set right.
And what are those things?
Choices. Choices I made.
You made your choices.
Paths I wish I could have seen more clearly.
The paths were always clear.
Given a chance to start again, I would.
Ah.
What's Christmas time but a time for paying bills? A time for finding yourself a year older, not an hour richer. What reason have you to be merry? You're poor enough.